We're told the story of a South Africa that's supposed to be this great nation. And then the next 15 years happen. The trauma my parents and grandparents endured, I'd say our generation, we have a different type of trauma.
Top 100 Young Mandelas of 2023. Featured at the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, various different TV shows, and has also founded an NPO called So We Vote. Otsile Nkadimeng is joining us today.
There are those who would challenge Mandela's leadership and say he sold out. You cannot expect people who are built into the system to be the ones that fundamentally restructure it. Young people are able to go further with ideas because we have less to lose, but we have more to gain.
As we know, we have elections coming up. What is the opportunity that you've identified that some young people might be missing? Hey, welcome to the latest episode of the C.Cast. It's an absolute pleasure having you here today. Before we get into the next guest, I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what this podcast is about. We are about connecting creativity and technology to uplift the African continent and connect the world to Africa. What we do is we chat to members of our communities. We give them a platform to share their story and to share how they are connecting Africa to the digital economy and the world to Africa. So before we get into this next guest, if you like our content, I just want to remind you to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment down below about what you think about the conversation. If you want to get more involved in the community, you can also join the WhatsApp group by scanning the QR code. In this group, we'll be able to share opportunities, knowledge with you, and you'll be able to meet other like-minded people of the community. So yeah, we hope to see you in the group soon. Until then, let's get into the episode. The elections that we're seeing now, the digital space really plays a big role in the election process. And when it comes to educating and sharing and amplifying people's voices, this is one of the first elections where we've had like TikTok come into the picture, right? So it's really important that we look at this topic and we see how tech is related to it and the digital space plays a role. But before we get into all of those topics, I want us to chat a little bit more about Otsile. So you're a young man, right? You are in first year this year, but you have been participating on all these huge platforms. This is not an easy thing to come about to such a young person, right? So how did you find yourself speaking on these platforms? We've got Metro FM, we've got these very ENCA. That's how I came across your message and the stuff that you're working on. So I wanted to find out from you, like as a young guy, how did you manage to find yourself in these different places? Like, where did that all start?
Well, it has to start with where my caring for society begins. I come from a family that's deeply rooted in the struggle for freedom in South Africa. My grandfather was a leader in the ANC, the trade union movement, and the Communist Party movement, one of the few leaders to have been in the NEC of the ANC and be in the leadership of the other tripartite alliance organizations. So growing up, leadership is inculcated in me from a very young age. I hear a lot of the stories my grandfather tells about his time as a leader in the liberation struggle. I hear the story my mother tells of how, as a young girl, not even in her mid-teens, snuck out in the middle of the night to go into exile. So for me, democracy and caring about South Africa and its place in the world is very personal for me. It's very personal for me because I live in a family that their entire story is made up of making this country a much more fairer country, a better country to live in, making South Africa a nation that every single citizen who lives here desperately never wants to leave. And so my social consciousness came about that way. And so it starts there. And then I go to high school. My my old school, I'm a Jeppe old boy. I went to Jeppe High School for Boys. And I discovered the debating society, which pretty much, imagine someone who cares about politics and then discovers, wait, I can actually do this and get full colors for it and all of these different awards. And so I picked up debating in high school, and my coach, Neo Gapola, an incredible guy, brilliant mind, he nurtured us and he incentivized us to learn more about the world, to learn more about what's going on in society. I already knew something, but the other guys just had to catch up. And then I discovered Model UN there. And that's where I first discovered climate change, because at our first Model United Nations conference, we were introduced to a Professor Colleen Vogel from the University of Johannesburg, I believe. I can be fact-checked on that. And she gave us essentially an overview of what climate change was. And those who know me, those who would Google me, know that I cared first about climate change in the public arena before I cared about voting and politics, like you said. And for me, that just sparked my social activism. I said, listen, I can have my opinions, I can talk to people in private, but ultimately on this matter, I must speak up. It is my duty. We as the young voices who understand the depth and the breadth of the climate crisis and how deep it actually goes, how it can impact us as a society, how it will impact the future of all of humanity, we must now speak up. We must raise the alarm. We must be louder. And so that was 2019. Imagine, grade 8, cares about climate change, does Model UN, does debating. Needless to say, I wasn't the most popular guy at an all-boys school, which is well known for rugby, hockey, and other stuff. But I stuck to those areas because I knew that I can't be like everyone else on this. On this, because it's a minority doing the work, I need to follow where the minority's gone. And as I say, the rest is history.
Sure, I never knew that you had a background in terms of your family being a part of the NEC and, having such a big role to play when it comes to the formation of our democracy. And I think you're very privileged to have had that opportunity, because a lot of us, we haven't had the same experience in that sense. And through the way that you speak, I can tell that you've had these meaningful conversations with either your parents or your grandparents, and it really shines through in the way that you speak.
Yeah.
And since, myself and a lot of people that are watching this today might not have had that same experience, I want us to dive a little bit deeper into that, right? So you have obviously been influenced by your parents and your grandparents and the experiences that they had. At what points does young Otsile, what kind of stories do you recall with your parents and your grandparents that kind of shifted you and put this purpose in you? So like we said earlier, it's not easy. It's not an easy feat to come and speak on these platforms and to really fight for people as an activist, right? So there's obviously there's a purpose there. That's kind of a seed that's been planted. I want us to get to that point. When was that seed planted? What kind of conversations did you have with your grandparents that you can remember, that you can maybe share with us, that we can also learn from?
So I was incredibly privileged to have sat at the feet of a very great leader, my grandfather. There are many people who are ministers today, there are people who have been president of this country, who can attest to the fact that at one point or another, as a young activist in the ANC or in the tripartite alliance movement, they would have come across him and he would have set their head straight. And so the benefit for me was that the time I was born was around the time that my grandfather was retiring from active politics. So he had a lot more time to spend at home. And so I got to sit at his feet as I saw leader after leader visit his home. I got to see and learn from him, because he'd be sitting in his sun lounge, he'd be reading. He had this little library of books because he was ambassador to Cuba. So he had books about capitalism, he had books about communism, he had books about theories of leadership.
Was he a cigar connoisseur?
No.
Was that just
I can't confirm that. If you want to confirm that, there's a book on him, Mokhomana. So the viewers who want to know more, they can go to Exclusive Books, get that book. But the time I came around, I think he had unwillingly surrendered his affinity for tobacco, my grandmother holding him to that. But he was the type of person who you study the style of leadership, and you have to be around him to pick up those lessons of leadership. My grandfather was not the type of a leader who enforced his personality on someone. He had a very suggestive type of leadership. He'd suggest potential answers, and you'd have to view his thought process. I mean, he was the type of leader you had to see him thinking, you had to view him working for you to pick up those traits. And so young me, obviously when people come over to the house, I'm that little kid who's in the corner. Nobody sees me that I'm watching and I'm listening. Everyone assumes I'm in the back. I'm playing with my toys or whatever. But I was listening and I was watching. And so it was a very on-the-job type of experience that I gathered. And the stories that that make me feel deep about South Africa's democracy and its close relation to me, there are a lot of stories. Some of them I don't think I can tell because that I'd need to run by the entire family. But I'll talk about the one of my mother's own experiences. She left, like I said, before she was even a teenager to go into exile. And I think about the story she tells of when she left, by that time the family had already split up. And when I say split up, I mean my mother's older siblings had gone. My grandfather had gone. So it was just her, her younger brother, my uncle, and my oldest cousin, and my grandmother that were left. And so she talks about what it was like going from a very big family unit. In all, my grandparents' children, they are 9. So you can imagine going from 9, now it's 2 of the children and 1 grandchild by the time she's leaving. The emotional pain that still exists there is something I can still feel at this moment. I can remember when I was hearing my mother talk about this, feeling the enormous emotional burden she still carries from that time. And then hearing about the fact that when they left, there was a period of time where everyone was split up in such a way that when you saw someone, you'd see them today, you'd see them tomorrow, but you'd never know that they'd leave, and they'd leave the next day in the middle of the night. You'd wake up the next morning. Your brother has left. He's gone to another country. Your father, you haven't seen your father for 10 years. He emerges one day at an airport in, I think it was, Mozambique, where they met him again. They were in transit going somewhere else. But the one that I think really hits home the hardest is the death of my uncle, Vernon. He was murdered by the security forces. They planted a car bomb in his vehicle. He was in Botswana at the time. It was 1986, 1984, one of those 2 years. It's one of those years. My mother tells me the story of when she found out about his death. That's a story I'll never forget. The pain that I still see in her eyes when she talks about it. And my grandmother, my late grandmother now, I remember whenever his name would be mentioned, or a song would be played, at family Christmas, all the old songs come out, people are dancing, the food's being prepared, a whole atmosphere is to be created. And then somewhere in the playlist, a song that was played at his wedding would come up. And you'd just immediately see it in her eyes. She misses her son, and the pain is there. So it's one, learning at the feet of my grandfather, seeing him operate as a leader, but 2, seeing the emotional impact the fight for freedom in this country has had on my family. And I mean, someone like me, I hold family very high. I spend every weekend, this is no exaggeration, every weekend for my entire primary school to early high school career before COVID at my grandparents' place. My uncles and aunts, we'd all assemble there, So for someone like me who has a socialization like that, family is very important. You see those impacts. Obviously, it's automatic in the mind to say, their struggle must not have been for nothing. This pain must not have amounted to nothing. We are living in a country that they contributed enormous amounts of pain to getting it to freedom. It is my duty now to just make sure, as the new custodian, the one who will be here, it'll be my duty to make sure that their pain would have not amounted to nothing, that South African democracy does indeed succeed, that the country that they wanted to make when they went into exile, when my uncles and aunts became soldiers for the Mkonto Wesizwe arm of the ANC, that their contribution would not amount to nothing. And so, in summary, that's where I got my leadership. Well, I wouldn't say that's where I got my leadership, but I'd say that's where I got my profound sense of right and wrong,
What kind
stepping
of
up
like
and
duty,
becoming
sense of
active.
duty or responsibility here?
Yeah, but I don't like that word duty.
Duty.
It leads to another conversation that I don't like talking about. But so, yeah, but I'll agree.
Okay, I will avoid the D word going forward. But no, thank you for sharing that. It really, yeah, it's really good to see where your purpose comes from, and it's understandable why you're so pushed and driven to have the impact that you're striving to have today. So one thing that you mentioned was the emotional burden and the trauma that your parents and grandparents had to endure. And I think as young people, we're kind of distanced from that. We live in, I mean, I was born in 1997, so that's 3 years after apartheid, right? So we were quote unquote born frees. We didn't have to see the struggle. And I think it's also interesting, like I was thinking about it the other day, South Africa hasn't always been on a decline.
Yeah.
After 1994, the first election, we were actually on an incline. But I think for me personally, someone who's turned 27 this year, that increment, that point after the election where things were going upwards, we were very young. We didn't get to see that. Once we entered high school and kind of became more conscious, we started experiencing the decline, and that's currently what we're seeing today. On multiple different metrics, if you want to go into that economic kind of perspective. But we've seen a lot of decline over our conscious existence. So for us, that's all we know. We don't know about the climb up. The other thing that we also don't know is what it took to get to the point that we are at today. And it's difficult. I think we kind of face a dichotomy because when someone comes and talks about all the sacrifice that was made and they compare it to where we are today, they're like, what was the point of all of this?
Yes.
So anyways, I think the topic that I want us to talk about is really like that trauma that you're talking about now. Do you feel like that has kind of been imprinted on your life in a way? Because there's other people out there as well that also experience a sense of trauma as well from apartheid. We're fighting to, economically emancipate people. But right now, a lot of people will say that the economic situation in South Africa is a lot worse off than what it was during apartheid. So I just wanted to get a sense from you if there's some sort of relation and what your thoughts are around this trauma that's kind of been passed on from the previous generation onto the next.
It's a very particular question. Let me break it down this way. I think the trauma my parents and grandparents endured, and my uncles and aunts, that's a trauma that I see. It's not necessarily a trauma that I can say myself I experience. I can say I see the impacts of it, and because I care for them, I therefore want to make sure that what they experienced, they can never feel as if it was for nothing. So I think that's the distinction I'd make. I'd say our generation, the ones born after 94, we have a different type of trauma. I'd say democracy was fought for on multiple fronts. The main conversation point now is whether the fight for economic emancipation was successful. But democracy was fought above and beyond just economic emancipation. It was fought for so that we could embody the spirit of multiracialism, or rather, let me say, non-racialism in this country, where we can live equally, where we can live in a society that's just, where every South African feels that their lives, depending on race, gender, economic situation or background, values as much as the next guy, where a life in Sandton means as much as a life in Alex. So to use that example, our generation's trauma is that our entire upbringing, we were told the story of that country. And as you said it, the first 15 years of South African democracy, relative prosperity, triple B plus rating. I mean, we were killing it, guys. Eskom is internationally rated. There are other countries sending their energy executives to come and see how Eskom's run here. We're building new infrastructure. The JSE is reaching new levels to the point the rand is in the southern hemisphere is one of the most highly traded currencies at that time. It still is now, just because we're in a fiat position, geopolitically speaking. But I mean, people at that time, you wanted to go out with your friends just gave you a 200 Rand note and you came back with change. Today, give you a 200 Rand note, I look at you like, what the heck?
Can't even buy a chappy.
Yeah.
Not okay.
But, that's the case. And so people, we're told the story of a South Africa that's supposed to be this great nation. So the first 15 years, it's living up to that promise because we're getting there. It's not the fastest progress, but we're getting there. We're getting somewhere. And it's that sense of momentum, that sense of we're getting somewhere as a country that keeps people happy. And then the next 15 years happen. And things start to slow down. But, it's slowing down at a pace where like, okay, we can still keep going. And then it gets worse. Then we start having our politics becoming very divisive. We start having movements like Fees Must Fall emerge, which now speaks to the issues that should have been addressed but hadn't been addressed, and the slowdown is preventing. By the way, Fees Must Fall, I was a child watching it on TV, so there are some who lived through and saw it. I watched it as a child, so my entire socialization of South Africa, as you said, is this entire second part. Fees must fall, roads must fall, Zuma must fall, junk status. It's just one blow after another.
I want us to jump in there quickly on the Fees Must Fall. What was your perspective on that? Because you saying that you were consuming it through the traditional media.
Yeah.
Well, from my perspective, Fees Must Fall started when I was in matric. So initially, I had also experienced it through traditional media, but I was also very active on Twitter at the time, now called X.
Yeah.
And something was very interesting to me
Yeah.
when I would compare the two different depictions of what was happening. When I would look at the media, there was a certain narrative that was being pushed. And then when I looked at Twitter, and I also had friends that had obviously matriculated the year before that I was also speaking to and getting a sense, because I was elated I really wanted to go to study at Wits, right? So because I wanted to study at Wits, I was like really hyper aware of what was going on because I wanted to know what I was going to step into. So I'd speak to my friends as well and find out from them like what's happening on the ground. And one thing that became clear to me is that there were two different narratives. There was the traditional media narrative, and then there was the online narrative and people experiencing it in person. Fast forward a year after that, I was at Wits, and it was a very interesting experience being a part of Fees Must Fall because we'd be standing outside of lectures waiting to go inside, and all of a sudden now there's a protest happening. Now police are marching down, throwing grenades and shooting and whatnot. It's like a war zone at varsity. It's a very weird experience. But from that experience, one thing that was important to me from my journey is that I became aware of the power of content and how it can amplify voices. So what was important to me was to be present as a person, as an individual student who was there and document my experience of it. So what I would do is I'd show up to the protest and I'd take pictures and participate in that way. A lot of the time people thought I was a part of the press. So I had a few rocks thrown at me and I had to bring out my student card and be like, guys, I'm one of you. I'm trying to give the other side of the story. Please don't hurt me. But over time, I managed to get inside the gatherings and hear what was going on behind the scenes from a student perspective. And the difference in narrative between what was happening on the ground versus what was being portrayed online or on traditional media on TV was stark. So I wanted to find out from you, like, what was your perspective at the time when you were consuming this content from, traditional media? Did you have the same experience, or what was your experience like?
So I'm watching this from the environment of my grandparents' home, the 1 o'clock news on SABC.
Yes.
And I'm seeing footage of, I think it was Wits University, it was Wits University in front of the Great Hall, where there's now a confrontation between students and cops in these big armored vehicles, students on that end. And, I think the commentary at the time is a statement from the VC at the time, Adam Habib and other people. And they're talking about this and they're saying, these students are just rabble rousers. They are there to create chaos. They are not doing anything. And then Bladen Zimande comes on. Hey, Nkadimen's been in that job for a while. He comes on and he says, no, we'll give the students a break for a year, and if they disagree, then we'll be the ones. And he says something to the tune of students must fall. And so that was my initial impression of fees must fall. Students are just protesting for no good reason. They don't want to study. They didn't study for tests, and now the tests are coming and they don't want to write. And then at the time, I had a cousin who was at Wits. So she'd come, and I'm obviously interested in this thing. I think I was around grade 5, grade 4.
Yo, I am old, man.
One of the places, but I asked her about it. I said, so what's going on there? And she explains what fees must fall is effectively. And so then I get an understanding of what the movement's about. So I see that the impression I get from media is different from the student perspective. From the student perspective, it's more than just fees. My understanding from the conversation I had with her, it was more than just about fees, because the Must Fall movement stemmed from Rhodes Must Fall. I stand to be corrected there.
Yeah.
So it was about the changing the education curriculum, so decolonizing education. It was also a thing about the rights of workers within universities as well. So I think that was the staff that was there, people who did the cleaning, the security, so on and so forth. And then above and beyond just protesting the 10% increase in fees that Wits and other universities had wanted, it also then became a movement for social justice. Students who are saying, you can't afford, students saying to the other students, you can't afford the 10% increase. I can't afford the fees before the 10% even. So I got that understanding of fees must fall. And that was the perspective through which I viewed it, that, okay, so this thing is more than just about protesting a decrease of fees. This is actually about giving young people the opportunity to study, because they need to study if they want to qualify for jobs. Not get jobs, but qualify to be in the running for jobs. You know, the way it was explained to me, a degree is just a piece of paper that you hand to someone that allows you to run in the race. It doesn't mean you'll get to the end. But that was my understanding of fees must fall. And
so being someone who, like, the thing that really caught my attention was there was an ENCA special that was happening where they gave young people an opportunity to come and speak on their platform. And I saw that there was a snippet where you spoke. And that's really what grabbed my attention and made me gravitate towards you, because of the way you spoke and the things that you were speaking about and encouraging people to register to vote. So you've got that experience of doing or participating and being a part of the traditional media, but you've also got So We Vote, which is an online kind of approach that aims to create content that makes information accessible to young people. I wanted you to kind of share with me how that kind of experience, the one being more down the traditional media path and the other being more down the new age media path of being online and on social media, what kind of differences you kind of see between the two different media approaches?
So, I was supposed to clarify. I didn't found So We Vote. I'm the founding executive director, so I was there when we launched it. Tafir Mustafa is the one who came with the idea for So We Vote. Tafir is a visionary leader. At the time, I had started Sundial. He came with the idea for So We Vote. He was part of the Sundial movement, which was my high school climate action network, which I co-founded with another visionary leader, Petra de Beer. But we'll get to that later. So the two approaches, the way media covers politics. Watching media on television is exhausting because the commentary, the language that's used, it's inaccessible. And even within it being inaccessible, added to that, the commentary around politics is never fruitful in this country. What people don't understand about politics today is that politics isn't being discussed within the same context as it was 10 years ago in the 2014 election. People are going to challenge my math results there. For a
Time flies when you're having fun, man.
So the context in which we discuss politics is different now. People are working longer hours for less money, but the cost of living has gone up, meaning they have less time to dedicate to listening to stressful political commentary on their time off already from their stressful lives. And now we have political commentary in the mainstream media using language in academic circles, speaking to issues that people who have only been in the political sector or the political elite spaces would understand. And it's within that context that now 2024, which is my take, the beginning of a consequential period for South Africa begins. I don't think 2024 is going to be seismic change. I'm sorry to tell you. I think that 2024 is the beginning of a transitional period in South Africa. Ultimately, the seismic change people are looking for, the potential for that exists in 29. It's not happening now in 24. But 24 is still a relevant election year. So the media, to summarize, has political commentary, talks about these things in a very technical, somewhat politically elitist way, and the commentary isn't even fruitful because it ends in arguments and discussion, and one person, not argument and discussion, but it ends in one person shouting louder than everybody else, taking everyone else's time, and essentially making it a very toxic environment to have a conversation. And then that's how people then talk about politics in the country. So it's with that foundation, because that's how my generation learns to talk about politics. You must remember, we started paying attention to how politics works after the 2014 election, so 10 years ago. And so we don't know a parliament where a point of order is raised and there's formality and there's no chaos and parliament security doesn't come in and it's not a brawl. We've never known a parliament like that. Those who had the first 15 years would probably remember a parliament like that. We don't. So it's with that context that we see that politics, the way we talk about it, is wrong. Politics, the way in which it is brought to us, the form in which it's brought to us, it's wrong. And the way in which it's being packaged for a newer generation, which we're always being told our generation must be the one that votes the most, but the way it's packaged is wrong. Because I don't know anyone under the age of 25 that owns a DSTV decoder. Do you, perhaps?
No.
I don't know.
I don't even watch TV anymore.
And so it's within that context that we're like, okay, Tafir and I now, because Tafir comes with the idea for something that can register young people to vote. It's within that context that he and I say, okay, so the way in which we must talk about politics, it must be fruitful, it must be understandable, it must be based on cordiality and respect, and it must be impartial. People mustn't feel that there's an agenda here. One of the things people don't like about mainstream media, they always feel there's an agenda. People mustn't feel that there's an agenda. And it must also be packaged in a platform that it can reach young people. So I took business studies in high school. So that's when we're having this conversation. So I'm saying, okay, so our target market is predominantly people between the ages of 18 to 25. Realistically, if we want to reach that audience, it will be easier to read. If we want to reach a youth audience, it will be easier to reach that demographic. So we say, okay, we're going to cover civic education because people need to know how parliament works, how a president is elected, who's in the line of succession. People need to know what independent candidates are and how they vote for them. People need to know who the parties are, who the leaders of the parties are, and what the parties stand for. And so we break all of this down and we say, okay, by the way, we're a bunch of grade 11s with no money as all of this is happening. So just bear that in mind. And so we say, okay, let's start an Instagram account and let's communicate our message through there. So we'll begin talking about how parties contest in the election. We will cover important things like the independent candidates ruling from the Constitutional Court, which we did do. We broke down the ruling and just took the essential parts, put it in understandable language. The way I say it to people is that our content is made for someone who just got home from work or from school, is tired, is laying in bed, has opened Instagram, came across our account, and they can just scroll through our posts. They don't have to feel stressed. They can just go there and collect information the same way they normally do. And so that was the idea for Sowing Vote. We said, okay, let's make it a platform like that. And so that's what we're doing now. We're covering the parties. We covered the independent candidates ruling. We covered important international issues like COP, climate change. Obviously, me being a climate activist, you could imagine how that meeting went down. I said we are not proceeding until we cover COP. And so that's what So We Vote's essential mission was at the start. Now we're looking at expanding that because we're seeing that, we started off early. This was a conversation we had in 2022. We really properly started doing this now, not now, mid to late 2023. We're really taking off now. We started with 4 followers, which were all 4 of the directors at the time. And now we're at 1,500 on Instagram. We're in the hundreds, at early hundreds on Twitter. Our TikTok we just launched now. We're planning to collaborate with content creators there. But that was the So We Vote idea, that we're going to package politics in a way that addresses the problems with the way politics is brought now in national media, but also in a way that when people want to get trusted information about the parties running in this election, people want to know more about how civic education, how the process of democracy works, how a president is elected, they can go to So We Vote and our platform is there. And, we've had relative success. It's a very small space. So it's sort of like we're Microsoft and we've just released Office. There aren't really that many competitors at the time this is being done. And so we're doing relatively well. We still don't have any funding. So if any entrepreneurs are watching this, please reach out to us. Reach out to me, Otsile Nkadimeng, on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn. Please, I need the money. So We Vote needs the money. But we're doing relatively well. We get good reviews. We haven't gotten any bad reviews. If we did, we'd monitor it. But that was the idea behind So We Vote. And you'll tell me, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the important thing is starting. Look, so I think a lot of people, when it comes to content creation, where they struggle is the consistency. And if you want to get your message heard out there, in order to make that happen, you need to be able to be consistent. In terms of the celebrities that we look up to, creators that are out there, we often see their come up and their blow up is often very quick.
Yeah.
But we don't often look at before that. And we don't often see the before and the behind the scenes in terms of they posted 3,000 times before that one that blew up, and then only then did they start to see some level of success. So I think as young people, that's where we struggle. So when I see you and I see, you talking about how this idea started in 2022, from what I can gather, and now it's 2024, 2 years later, and still moving and progressing. I think that's a sign that what you're doing is going to eventually reach the masses, and you will figure it out as long as you keep on going.
Thank you for the vote of confidence.
No, 100%. And I know it's difficult, because it's difficult when you create content and you put it out there, because you're essentially putting a piece of yourself out there. And when you start out, generally it's not going to be that good, because you're beginning. When you start something new, you're not going to be good at it. You have to do it a few times until you can actually start to build up your skills. So because we have this expectation for things to blow up out of nowhere, when you put something out and you've invested a lot of time into doing it and it doesn't get the kind of response that you expect, it can be disheartening, and it makes it very difficult to continue. So that's why I really admire any young person today who's putting out content and that can keep the consistency behind it. I admire that a lot, because that is a requirement in order to achieve the goal that you've set out to achieve. So yeah, that's my perspective. We operate in the digital space, so that's something that I've seen time and time again. But I'm excited to see what you guys do. And when it comes to your, operating as traditional, now venturing into new age media, do you see kind of any opportunities to collaborate with the traditional media space? And have you ever entered that kind of conversation with anyone there? Because, you're sitting in a studio with Bradan Moyane from ENCA. There's potentials to collaborate. I don't know if you've explored any of that, or what your experience has been like, engaging and interacting with the more traditional kind of media.
So the way I think of So We Vote, even though it's a nonprofit, I think of it as like in terms of a startup. So I'm like, the beginning is pretty much the stage where you need to prove that you'll go past the fizzle and you won't go bust, that you'll actually have some track record. So as executive director, I thought that strategically, we need to build a track record. we're still relatively new. We're still relatively unknown. I look at the big institutional media houses, like the really, really big ones, E Media Holdings, the SABC, Newsroom Africa, the Daily Maverick, News 24. I say, I'm fine with if they cover us, but from the point where we need collaboration, I think let's first, beyond any doubt, prove that we're an organization that can do this. So 2024 is very much the year where we are planning to do this on our own. We want to prove that So We Vote does have an actual audience, that it actually does meet a specific need within the market, whether that market is registering people to vote, civic education, enhancing participation in democracy. There's a need there. We are filling it because we have a very good product, a very good service that we offer. And so we haven't explored those opportunities. I mean, the opportunities exist, and I'm very good at cultivating a network to ensure that those opportunities stay there, they don't die off. But I expressed to the people involved there that, listen, I value your time, and I value your platform, and I value the value you bring to an engagement or an interaction between So We Vote and you guys. And so I don't want to waste your time by having you sit around and wait with us, because we were high schoolers that are now first years. I don't know anything about budgeting. I don't know anything about putting together a board of directors. Everything I'm doing is on-the-job training. And the risk there for me to fail and bring you down with me is incredibly high. So let me do this one on my own. And 2026, we can begin preparing and work together. And 29, which is the real consequential election, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most of the parties, if they're willing to be honest with you, 2029 is where we can really hit the ground here. But obviously there's the argument that I'm completely wasting time, that I should be doing it now. And I mean, if you've met any person who has a baby in an organization that they've started, they want that thing to grow at hyper speed, okay? Like, there's some mornings I wake up and I want to be Adam Newman and I want to burn billions of rands, just hyper growing So We Vote into the largest platform in South Africa for this type of work. But then another part of me remembers that people that do that, there's very few of them that succeed. Uber is an example of that. I can't remember the guy's name, Colin something, the founder of Uber. He grew it very quickly. It succeeded. You look at WeWork, example of what happens if you grow too fast. It just doesn't work out. Obviously, WeWork's still around, but if you want something like So We Vote, which is there to enhance democracy, you want to build it right. Mm-hmm. And so we have to take our time. And when the opportunities emerge, I tell them, listen, don't take it personal. I just need to make sure that by the time we work together, this relationship can be fruitful. And when, say So We Vote fulfills its uselessness, because really in a perfect democracy, we should be completely useless. We leave the interaction better off for it. You've adapted, we've adapted, society has benefited, democracy is enhanced. And with that, that's the lens through which I view these partnerships. That's the lens through which I view my role at So We Vote as executive director. I'm giving people an insight into the way I'm thinking. Though if you were a funder, I have a different set of points I have to make to you. But yeah.
Hey, hold on. I just need to remind you very quickly to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment down below about what you think about this episode. We need to be able to tell the algorithm on YouTube that we are creating content that is valuable. So please engage with this content, whether you're listening to it on YouTube or on Spotify or whatever platform, please engage. It just helps us reach more people, brings more people into the community, which means more access to knowledge and opportunities for you, a member of the community. So please don't forget to engage on this video or this audio podcast and leave a like, comment, or subscribe and give it a share. Thank you so much. We'll hop back into the episode. There are opportunities. I think the thing that I was trying to get down to was really like, my experience being a young person when I first started out my career. Initially, I could see the discrepancy between the traditional way of doing things and the new way of doing things. And I could see why the traditional way was going to fail. And now this was like 4 or 5 years ago. Fast forward to today, those things that I could see are now playing out. We're seeing DSTV struggling, looking at selling off to an international company because they haven't transformed digitally quick enough. And we're seeing a lot of, I mean, there was a recent blackout by Daily Maverick, I think it was, where they completely shut down all of their news outlets for a day just to kind of showcase to people, well, this is what's going to happen in the future if you don't support traditional newspapers.
And one of the areas in that, maybe perhaps I can now answer directly to the question. We say to the people in journalism that we meet and interact with that, listen, gone are the days where people will inherently trust something because it comes from an institution that has the long-term experience of something like ENCA, because we've seen in the past discrepancies. And I'm using ENCA as an example. I know people over there, you guys are great, but just general, the way traditional media works, the way you're saying it. But above and beyond that, like I said, the way traditional media is packaged to people, it's just not going to work anymore. Reading a 7-minute article from Times, not that many people are going to do that.
Yeah, people don't read, and it's consumability, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to listen and view something than it is to read something.
And so it's through collaborating with TikTok content creators that can make what's really like a 1 minute 30 second video, post to TikTok, post to Instagram. In 1 minute and 30 seconds, I can learn what I would have learned in that 7-minute video, in that 7-minute article. The risk, unfortunately, with social media, and we recognize this, is that it seems like you have to be on the right side of where you're getting your news on social media for it to be beneficial to you. Obviously, with traditional media, you have those few agencies that are like, so I'm not sure if there are restrictions of words I can use on podcasts, but
no,
there's none. Okay,
that's the beauty about this kind of content, is it's unfiltered, right? So, like, exactly towards what you're saying, if you're on the news, you can't. There's a certain protocol that you have to follow, which is very, read from the teleprompter. It's all scripted. It's not authentic and genuine.
The Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's caused this kind of feeling of distrust amongst people and traditional media, is that it's all scripted, it's all planned out in a specific way. If you go onto TikTok, it's someone that's just pulled up their phone and just starts talking about how they feel about something. And that's a lot more genuine and authentic. And I think in the past, people haven't had the opportunity to consume that kind of content. People didn't have the opportunity to create that kind of content. If you wanted to create something, you would have to go and buy like a proper camera, and and you'd have to go and process all the film, and it was expensive and costly and not accessible. What's happened now with technology is it's made the creation of media a lot more accessible. So I can have that same level of technology in my pocket, pull it out and record something straight off the bat and put it out today in the span of like 30 minutes, let's say, or maybe even less. So that's how the environment has changed due to technology. And the traditional media houses, in my opinion, have not caught up to that. They're doing things in the old way. And that's created a sense of distrust because the audience has moved on, but they're still stuck in the past. So I just want to see how those things meet in your mind and how So We Vote kind of plays a role in that.
All right. So I'd agree with you there. I think traditional media is still playing to their traditional audience, and that is older people who still have multi-choice boxes, still will turn on the TV to watch Morning Live in the morning. I do that. SABC Plus. So SABC is sort of catching up there. They need to improve the platform. It's bad, but it works. I mean, inherently for our generation, because I think we're not a homogenous group as young people. So I can't say all young people are this way. But I would say that the general trend among young people is that we're on the move. We want information quickly because the nature of our lives is that we're moving very quickly. I mean, everything's constantly expanding. The world around us is constantly growing. What it took someone 20 years ago to make a normal and successful life, for us, that's not going to cut it. So we need to be faster. We need to be more adaptable. We need to access information a lot faster. And now we have supercomputers in our pockets that allow us to access information from all over the world within seconds. So traditional media is trying to compete in that landscape. I don't think they're ever going to make it. Like you said, counting on a big flat screen TV to reach people under 25 is just not going to work. We're not going to do that. Netflix can be on a laptop, can be on our phones. News needs to be on our laptop and needs to be on our phones, and we need to be able to access it that way. So that's where they need to be. They're not there yet. So We Vote takes advantage of that because, I mean, we're not a news agency. What we're doing, we're just packaging information, and we're helping to give perspective to politics in its present form. So you're not going to see us at like the site of an explosion or something. But where we come in is that we've recognized that there is a unique opportunity in that you just need to give people content that they are looking for, content that gives them information about what's currently happening politically, but also content more specifically that isn't scripted, like you're saying. So We Vote content is authentic because we put all the information out there. We say to people when we do party infographics and we break down manifestos, it's very clear in our infographics. We say we have contacted XYZ party, and as we were putting this together, we were constantly getting their feedback. Immediately people know that this is not an agenda. This is information that is clear, that is impartial, that is just there for them to know more. And it's also done in such a way that, I mean, we distill it down to 1 or 2 sentences. Media, you want to know something about something, they bring on a professor, and we know academics because they are very detailed-oriented people. So normal people don't have time for that. And so watching a 7-minute video to find out something that you could have probably read for like 2 seconds, not 2 seconds, 1.5 minute on So We Vote's Instagram. That's where the value analysis has to be. And so traditional media hasn't made that value analysis that in fact less in fact gets you more in this case, but it's less with quality that gets you more. You want to have a soundbite? Have a soundbite. But that soundbite must be inclusive of the important information. You can't just take a part of what someone says and then package that and then leave out the rest. Or actually that sounds contradictory if I don't continue explaining it. You can't put a section of what someone says, package that, send it to the masses, but exclude important information that comes after that. So in the US, what's happening now with the elections there, or maybe let me even take examples here. I do not endorse or in any way support the MK party, but traditional media has put out articles that say the Rand hits its lowest level ever due to Zuma making it on the ballot again. And then you go and you see how much that's by, and it's like 90 cents. But the way in which it is packaged to people, it just gives it like different connotation. It seems there's an agenda there. And so people then begin to mistrust mainstream media. And so that's what I mean. They take a section of the truth and then they'll put it out there to get clickbait. But I obviously can't blame some of them because it happened with the commercialization of information. The moment in which news agencies started charging prices, very hefty prices, to have people advertise on their platforms or bring on specific corporate entities on their boards. At that point, I think there was a serious conundrum within the media space, with the journalism fraternity. And they'll say it. Daily Maverick did the blackout because they're struggling financially. That's at least what they said. I hope I'm not misunderstanding that. And News 24 gets criticized for putting their articles behind paywalls, making it inaccessible. So my personal opinion, we shouldn't be putting a price on it. So We Vote doesn't put a price on it. You give us money, we're just going to keep putting information out there. We're not going to benefit from it financially from selling that type of information. People should never have to pay for information. It's as simple as that. And so I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, for sure. And, being in these traditional media spaces and speaking on these big platforms, a lot of the time, I'm sure you kind of find yourself being the youngest mind in the room. I wanted to ask you, being the youngest mind in the room, like what kind of challenges does that come with? But not only that, I'm sure it also comes with opportunities as well. So yeah, how's your experience being on these big platforms and being the youngest mind in the room? communicating to the more mature generation, how's your experience been that in terms of challenges and opportunities?
So very often, I approach it with kiddie gloves because you're addressing older people who pretty much have what I call a father knows best attitude to what you're saying. Because for them, it's like,
This is the way it works.
This kid was born in 2004. Now he's coming and he's telling us how we should be doing things, or he's coming and telling us what we're doing wrong. And so very often the response is father knows best, or you young people do X, Y, Z. You know, I attend, in addition to media, I attend platforms. I attended the Presidential Climate Commission. They had a colloquium. I was the only person on that stage born in the 21st century. We're how many years? 23 years now. 24 years into the 21st century. I was the only person born then, within this century. Everything that I engage with there, with the older people in the room, I'm always having to let it out before I can express even a monochrome of the lived experiences of young people and how those lived experiences are now articulated into these ideas and proposals that I am there as the vessel to hand over. They're not my ideas. Most of them are ideas that I get from speaking to people before I go on platforms. Before I go on any platform, including this one, I speak to people about, okay, so these are the areas I might touch on. What do you think about these points? Obviously, it's within the people that I can reach, but the ideas come from young people. The ideas are youth-centered and youth-driven. But in those spaces, those ideas, I have to approach them in a very subtle way. I have to approach them in a very calm way, in a very kind way. If they get angry and they start yelling and they start banging their fists on the table, they're called passionate. They're called more or less justified. If I get up there and they do that, if I get up there and I do that, I'm called out of control. I'm called someone who just cannot hear an opinion that disagrees with them. And so there's a standard that must be upheld when I go on media, traditional media, and engage with older folk. I have the higher burden of being beyond reproach. I can't get frazzled. I can't get mad. All I need to do is speak the truth, but do it in a way where I do not concede any authority to the facts. Because the facts in what I'm saying, the truth in what I'm saying, is ultimately what wins the conversation in the end. And they end up saying, okay, you're right. And so that's where traditional media, well, maybe not so much traditional media, but engaging with older people within that space, that's where there's a bit of a challenge. But I really do hope I answered the question.
Before we move on to the opportunity, because I think there's also an opportunity that I think is important for us to touch on. There's probably going to be more mature audience that's watching this that's saying, well, because I'm older, I have more skin in the game, I have more experience, and that's why my opinion holds more value. What do you think about that?
It's a point I make in climate, that you cannot expect people who are built into the system to be the ones that tear it down or fundamentally restructure it. The point effectively boils down to this. Young people are able to go further with ideas that get us to a better place sooner because we have less to lose, but we have more to gain if we do it correctly. Let me break that down. A young person my age doesn't have that many commitments. I'm not married, I don't have a home, I don't have a car, I don't have debts to my name, unless you count university debts. I have less to lose. But if I restructure South Africa's economy in a way that gives more people access to economic power, enhances the buying power of individuals to do more with the rand, makes the system more equitable, there's more gain for me, because that means the majority of my life will be lived in a context where things are much better than they currently are. But the idea of a gradualist approach has never yielded any very positive results. And especially in a country like South Africa, where we're expecting seismic change out of the election, there's a discussion between, do we go the more radical route or do we go the more timid route? The radical route being the one that has the highest reward but also the highest risk. And the gradual one being very medium to low risk, but also benefit isn't that high. And so that's the fundamental back and forth between young and old. Older people, let me be very kind there. Older people, I understand where they're coming from as well, because for them, they've built an entire life. They've pretty much dedicated the first 30 years, 40 years of their lives to building what they already have. And what we're saying puts that in danger. It's natural for someone like that to want to fight back. If I came and tried to take your car, you'd fight me before you gave me your car. And if I didn't have a gun to do it, I mean, obviously, I'm not getting your car. I'm not advocating for hijacking, and I'm not saying anything should be done through the barrel of a gun. I detest that. I think that violence has no proper place in a modern democratic country. But the point I'm getting at here is that a decision must be made by the older generation. Will they continue to hold on to their unique point, their unique power in the already existing establishment by holding young people who want massive seismic change away to defend their own property or to defend what they already have? Or will they identify that things are not going correctly in the current system that they're trying to protect? And so therefore, as they like saying, only the young can save us now, will they then concede their power, their social power, economic power, and influence to allow young people to implement the change that we really recognize is needed for the country? And that exists within these spaces that we're talking about now. And so when the conversation's had, obviously there's a burden on my front to meet them where they are, because otherwise they turn off, which is another nuanced space within the conversation that we have. But to another extent, I don't concede the progressive values. I just help contextualize them. And when they say, okay, you have a point there, and I pretty much do the legwork of bringing them to where I am before I can take them to where we need to be, which is very hard and it's very long, but it's worth doing. But, the way in which we've done it at So We Vote is that we are doing it pretty much simultaneously. So you have me, you have you, and you have Tafir, who would go on traditional media and would advocate that message. But you'd see it in the way we engage with political organizations, that we don't consider the fact that progressive values are fundamental to moving South Africa forward. I mean, you'll see it. There's a clip we have on our Instagram where our own politics director, Ewan Dawkins, challenges Gayton McKenzie and his policy on, I think he wanted to build a wall.
Okay.
And we challenge that, like, America has the largest military budget in the world. They can do it. We have a lot more problems and a lot less money. How are we supposed to do it? And believe me, it's a big point, but we challenge it. We keep progressive values in the discourse. And, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so
I fear I'm not answering your questions. That's why I kept going back to
very
that.
insightful conversation. So we touched on the challenge, right? Young people often feel as though they don't have a say, which is why I think there's a lot of disillusionment when it comes to voting and when it comes to participating in things. We deal with challenges every day. We're being beaten down. Sometimes it feels like just being able to get up and go out of your house is a challenge in its own, because of all the things that we're facing, and it's tough right now. So I think a lot of young people, they don't have the drive, or they don't see the point in trying to vote. They don't see the point in trying to start a business. They don't see the point in, taking the first steps forward. And it's understandable why that's the case, because of the reality we're in. But on the flip side, I see someone like you, who's a young person, who's identified opportunities, who's making his voice heard, who's building a personal brand for himself, who is having these conversations with influential people, like I've been mentioning throughout the podcast. What is the opportunity that you've identified that some young people might be missing?
It's very difficult to answer that question because it depends on where you are when you start. I'm not going to be like those billionaires. I'm not a billionaire, but I'm not going to be like those billionaires who go on and say, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. It's just about what you do with it. No. Where you are when you start with your first 24 hours determines how far you'll go with it. I've been privileged. I started in the climate space, and given my family's background, I've had access to people and a breadth and a depth of knowledge that most people wouldn't have had access to, which helped me go further. In the climate space, had access to networks of people that helped expand what So We Vote is doing now. Had access to incredible young people who are a part of So We Vote right now. But I also do understand that it's because I've had access to all of that So We Vote has gone as far as it has. There is someone in this country who has the same idea, doesn't even have close to half the resources or network that I do, probably can articulate the issues of youth better than I can, but they'll never touch an ENCA microphone or an SABC microphone or sit at Daily Mavericks The Gathering. And so there's a unique privilege there. And that privilege is why I've succeeded. But with that being said, there is a component to it there is a component to everything that comes with starting an organization that does give you the chance of success. And that is, like you said, having consistency to it. Getting up and starting an organization like So We Vote is not easy, even with the access to the networks that I have. It takes consistency. It takes having a clear vision and understanding where you want to go with it. It takes people waking up every morning and being driven by what you're doing. You have to be passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to get anywhere with it. I say to everyone, my philosophy is the issue that keeps me up at night before I go to bed, keeps me tossing and turning. That's the first thing I work on the next morning, because that is an indication of what you wake up and you do the next day, where you want to start. And primarily for me, with So We Vote, it is a basic idea. Anyone can apply this to their lives, even if they don't have the resources. I mean, eventually I do think that it's also a bit of luck. Realistically, it's privilege, but also it's a bit of luck. If you get lucky, you can go very far with your ideas and your projects. But it's also fundamentally for me driven by the fact that I wanted to make good things happen again. I felt that people forgot that good things can happen in South Africa. And I said, let's wake up every morning and remind people that good things can happen in this country. For other people, could be different ideas different motives that drive their project. And so, to answer your question, it's a very complex answer. It's the culmination of multiple forces coming together to get you to where you are. I'll never toot my own horn. Just so in case that's where you wanted me to go, I would never toot my own horn and say that because of something I've done. But it's the culmination of those different factors coming together, a right idea and a meeting of the right people that has facilitated So We Vote going far. So if you're going to try and manufacture it yourself, start with the people, start with the purpose, start with the network, and then from there, just work really damn hard to provide a very good service or a very good product so that people can genuinely walk away saying, I like that. I want a piece of that.
Yeah, I think you've kind of touched on something there. And you mentioned how it's a group of people that come together and make this thing possible. It's not one or two people. It takes multiple people. And we all have different strengths, right? So I think for me personally, and from what I'm hearing from what you're saying, is that it's about working together. And it's honestly about paying it forward as well, in my opinion, right? So for example, we've been able to run this digital agency now for 4 or 5 years. And we've gotten to the point now where it's grown. There's a responsibility on us to invest that back into our country, to invest it back into the people who have invested in that as well. So when it comes to the opportunities that we have, I mean, this is the exact reason why we wanted to get you on the podcast, was because this podcast exists to amplify the voice of the people in our community. there's someone in our community who's speaking about voting. We want to bring that person on and give them the platform to speak. So I think it's really about paying it forward by reinvesting back into the people that share a similar vision, that are also taking their own action, can really amplify and expand on what they're doing. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
And you just reminded me of something I was supposed to mention there, but I think I forgot to mention it. So there's a point to a question where you said that it's hard for people to actually wake up and go and vote and do that actual business there. We all are shareholders in South Africa. If we don't go on election day and exercise our voting right, because I'm assuming the majority of your audience are people that are more business-minded, we're all shareholders. If we don't go there and vote out the current board of directors who appointed the leadership of the company is going to continue the same trajectory. The fact will remain, as imperfect as it is, that bad conditions will disincentivize people from voting. But it's precisely because they are bad conditions that people must go vote. But there's another factor to that people say, okay, fine, I understand that. I will go vote. But who do I vote for? And in that case, we have to talk about leadership. And I think that's a portion we must talk about separately because it requires a lot more insight. Because I'll be honest, that has been my kryptonite. I've fought every point. I've won every other argument. But then when people get to, I just can't trust the leadership that's available, I can't answer that.
Well,
but that can actually be answered by the very individuals who are saying it themselves. Because the idea that people who become elected leaders descend from the heavens and are anointed by God to rule over a country and to become leaders that can create a fruitful society, a good society, a country worth living in, that idea, it's a false notion. Anyone who has good ideas, who can work hard, who can inspire confidence and hope in people for a better South Africa, that person can be a leader. And so that's ultimately where I get people to. And then after that conversation, we have to talk about, okay, now how do we get you to run? How do we get you on the ballot? I don't have the resources for that. So I say, okay, so I've given you the idea. You now go out and hunt for that. I've taken you to the water. It's up to you to drink.
Well, according to you, we've got 5 more years to figure that out. So we'll take steps forward.
Together.
And
we can do it.
Yeah.
We genuinely can do it. There's so many people who genuinely care about this country who have left and have come back now. I love that part. They say South Africans who are good South Africans who can change this country are leaving. They're coming back. They're coming back. And not only are they coming back, they're coming back to actually fight for this country because they're realizing that on no other place in God's green earth will you ever find a country like South Africa. And this place is in our DNA. We were born here. We will live here. If you're like me, when you die, you'll be buried here. It's all about that. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, not at all. So, no, thank you for that. Honestly, I think the important part really is the inspiration elements. We need to, as young people, be inspired to take action. And that's why we need leaders to inspire us. So, Otsile, I really see that in you. And I hope that we can amplify that today.
You get me in trouble. People who say that, you get me in trouble because then the parties reach out to me and I decline them one by one and they start to dislike me. So let's avoid that part there.
Well, from an entrepreneur perspective, when you see a gap, you also see an opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, quick question.
Yeah.
Mandela or Tutu, who inspires you more? And why?
Qualities of leadership. Okay, qualities of leadership, I'll go with Madiba. Because I look at him and unlike most people, I don't look at the Nelson Mandela who's smiling and doing the Madiba jive. I look for the stoic leader who had to sit on his own in private and think about all of the options in front of him on where to take South Africa and find the one with the least amount of violence, highest amount of opportunities for the country, then, so that's from a perspective of learning qualities of leadership, because, I mean, we were incredibly blessed in that we had a leader who, in what was the most impossible situation, I think if you're like me and you took history in high school, you understand what I mean when I say impossible situation. Who in the most impossible situation had the clarity to see that for us to get somewhere, or to get to a point at least where we can get better as a country, we have to get there. And he got us there. And, you know, there are those who would challenge Mandela's leadership and say he sold out. You know, I don't think he was really aiming to be the one-man show that fixed it all. I think he understood that he was human. He wanted to get us to a point, and then from there, it was up to the rest of us to get us to the next point. And so from a quality of leadership, Nelson Mandela. But from a way of looking at life, I'd definitely take the Arch. Because Tutu's one of those people that a conversation with him can leave you feeling more inspired to want to live life to the fullest and to want to make your life worth something, to have contribute something to society, and to do it with joy. And to, you know, I read the book Joy between Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And so personal philosophy, I'd obviously sit with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and I'd find out from him, because he's a man who suffered extreme challenges in his life, and yet he's a man who is well known for his laugh. Like, it's the laugh that could change a room, could make everyone feel happy and joyful. And Madiba was a type of a leader that even after every interaction, even if he told you were wrong, you saw where he was coming from and you understood the factors around that. And I think his type of leadership today in the world, we need more of it. We need more of it. We need more of that type of a leader. We need more of someone who gives us a sense that they're in control and that they will think deeply about the direction they take us. And if that person can't think like that, you'll have a lot more challenges. You'll have a lot more people challenging that decision. We need unity for, like, my opinion, we need unity for the next 15 years to get us to a good place. After that, well, I'm not saying we should be divided, but we'll be better off.
Cool.
Sorry for that long answer.
No, it's all good. And then last question before we wrap up. One thing you would change about how young people engage with politics?
Oh.
Only one.
Yeah, but it has to be an important one, because I only get one. I'd want to change the way young people see leadership in politics. I think if young people can see leadership in a much better way, and if we can decide on the leaders we choose to support in a much better way, then the rest should be able to take care of itself. Because, guys, there are some of you who are going to vote for MacG's party.
MacG has a party.
I think he has a party, or he's an independent.
What kind of party is this?
I don't know.
Is it the one with the cooler box?
I don't know, but there are people who will vote that way. And no offense to MacG, he's a great guy, he's a good platform. But guys, with the challenges that you understand South Africa has, you can't be making such decisions. And so we need to be a lot more serious about leadership. I think it's the fact that I was told this by someone who's a political analyst, and I won't say their name, just out of courtesy for them. But they said, some of the greatest leaders South Africa's ever had, your Walter Sisulu, your Bram Fischer, your Helen Suzman, your Oliver Tambos, all of them, Ahmed Kathrada, none of them in today's politics would gain any traction because the way we see leadership has changed fundamentally. Now, if we can change that, we can find the good leaders. We can distill the good from the bad. And then we can be in a much better off space. And so that's the one thing I'd change. I wish you gave me more things I could change, but I suppose that one would do.
We'll start with that one.
Yeah.
And then over the next 5 years, we can move on to a few more. And then I'm going to be seeing you on the ballot paper.
No.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Otsile. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you today. And thank you for watching. That's episode 21 of the C.Cast. Thank you so much for watching this latest episode of the C.Cast. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. We're trying to achieve a huge mission and we need you to invest in it. The best way to do that is by liking, sharing, and subscribing and leaving a comment down below. By doing that, you help the algorithm understand that we are offering content that is valuable and it will reach more people. There might also be someone out there that just wants to learn a lesson or who might be able to take something away from the podcast. Share it with them. And lastly, if you'd like to be more involved in the community, if you want access to opportunities, knowledge from our experience in the digital marketing space, or to connect with other people who are like-minded and uplifting the continent, starting businesses and using tech and creativity to make them successful, join the WhatsApp group by scanning the QR code and we'll chat with you there. Until then, bye.